Welcome to the Jaybe show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. My name is James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this Sunday afternoon. Today is September 1st, 2024. It is 1 p.m. here and other times around the world. So good to see all of you joining me for this beautiful day. If you guys have not already, you guys can go ahead and like this stream. This also helps us out here at RBN to reach more people so that we can debunk the propaganda that's being pushed on us by imperialists and by the corporatocracy that is running our system. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also do that. If you guys have not already, you guys can go to Revolutionary Blackout at substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever we go live or upload clips, so you have that there. Also, if you guys have any email inquiries, any stories that you would like to share with us, or any questions, you guys can also go to revolutionaryblackout@outlook.com, so you guys can get in touch with us. So thank you very much for that there. Just to let you guys know, we are also going to be having a discussion here, a couple of news, one news story that we're going to be covering today. So just to let you guys know, I'll be touching on that a little bit later. But what are we talking about today? And before I do that, a blanket hello to everybody in the audience. Whenever I have a guest, I want to be respectful of their time as well. So we're going to be talking about today, later in the show, we're going to be talking about flip-flops. Flip-flopping Donald. Well, you have some MAGA folks that are not too happy with him. In fact, some MAGA folks, especially in Florida, are quite angered with the Don. So we'll be talking and discussing Donald Trump a little bit later in the show. But before that, I have some questions, some China questions. So we will be discussing the China questions today for this stream. I cannot wait to get into this because ultimately there's a lot that needs to be discussed. So with that being said, my guest is an American journalist that is in China, a published author, radio show host, podcast, and media commentator. I would like to introduce Mr. Jason Smith. Welcome to the show and welcome to finally being with me on this stream.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for your time, James.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. I know it is very late over there, and thank you very much for being so willing to come on even at this late hour. One of the things that I wanted to discuss, and one of my first questions that I had is, like I was saying off screen was that there's going to be a lot more talk about China. China is really part of a new multipolar world, as we can see, that is strengthening its economic presence within the world, and it's making the West, particularly the United States, more antsy. Their knees are knocking right now, as we can see. As our communication technology advances, now more people are looking at China as a model, especially to follow. But one thing I hear, especially a lot in the Black community, is about these debt traps that are, within Africa, and trying to make it sound like China is this looming force over us. And one of my questions is the debt trap, is that notion, is there any validity to that? And if there isn't, then how can we in the West, increase not only peaceful and diplomatic relations with these African countries like China, but how can we also help raise the living standards through cooperation and collaboration?
These are all really great questions, and I think they're really important. It's tragic that a lot of online conversations just are dismissive of them, but it's really important to take these kinds of accusations seriously about debt traps. There's a professor at Johns Hopkins University. Her name is Deborah Brodigan, and she's addressed this. She's a specialist on China-Africa relations, and
Okay.
she's written an article for The Atlantic saying that debt trap was a myth. Now, I've actually looked at the contracts for the loans that China has made to African countries, almost all of them. This is an area in which I am currently writing my second book. So most of the loans are concessional. And by that I mean they're 0% loans or they're 2% loans. There are loans that are higher, but there are very few of those. The vast majority, and I mean 80 or 90%, are like 0 to 2% with 20 years to pay them back. And if you actually go to John Hopkins' website, SAIS, where they study China-Africa relations, they have a bar you can press just for debts that have been forgiven, and it is in the billions of dollars, individual loans, 10 million here, 20 million there. China's never foreclosed on anything. China's never said, oh, you can't pay for this. This is ours now. China will always forgive the debt for countries that cannot pay it back. China's intention in making these loans is to develop. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. You know, if I post something online where I say, hey, China built this school in Sudan for free as a gift, people get mad at me and say there's no such thing as a gift. China's up to no good. And so you can actually look at the realities of why China did that is to curry favor. Sure, why not? That's what diplomacy is all about. Would you rather curry favor by giving lectures like the US does to so many African countries so much of the time? Or would you rather curry favor by building hospitals, schools, roads, and bridges? Is there a debt trap? Absolutely. A lot of what the IMF and the World Bank did in the 1980s and the 1990s was in fact debt trap. Maybe, you know, if we want to say the best possible thing about the IMF and World Bank that we can, maybe they were doing it, it wasn't deliberate. It was an accident because they had failed economic policies that they were forcing loan recipient countries to take. But China has a completely different set of policies than the IMF and World Bank. And China has a no strings attached policy for loans. So when the IMF and World Bank, oftentimes they say, oh, in order for you to get this loan, we really want you to clean up things like, you know, there's corruption, and we're going to look at your government. You're going to need to restructure your political system just a little bit and change your banks a little bit, and then we'll give you this loan. And this is often referred to as the Washington Consensus. And whether deliberate or not, it oftentimes allows foreign companies from the West primarily to come in and buy up African resources and then use that bridge as an excuse to exploit and take out resources. Does China want oil? Does China want cobalt? Does China want these things? Absolutely. China also wants to engage Africa in trade. But the difference is China does it in a way that is on favorable terms for African leaders. And let me point out why. And you can go and check this out on Google right now if you want to know more. There is a forum in Beijing. It's called the Forum on China-Africa Relations next week. And African leaders from countries all over Africa, and I mean all 55 nations, are coming to Beijing. And one of the primary things they want are more loans. Now, if you look at the loans that Africa has taken out, the vast majority of them are from the West, actually. They're from IMF, they're from World Bank, they're from the Paris Club, the Club of Rome, all of these other institutions in the EU and the United States. In the United States, China represents a very small portion of that. Only about 10% of loans to African nations are actually from China, but they're usually on better terms with the recipient nations. We also have to look at the agency of African leaders. African leaders are not just sitting there waiting for IMF to tell them what to do or China to tell them what to do. They have a suite of options in front of them. And most of the time, they're choosing what projects they want. And we can't erase the agency of African leaders and the kinds of projects that they want. But I have to say that the vast majority of Chinese projects in Africa are things that are infrastructure developing, that are the kinds of projects that will see Africa develop towards its goal of 2063. The African Union has this 2063 goal of basic modernization for the African continent, which is really difficult and complicated for a lot of different reasons, but that's a whole added value conversation.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that in what you just described, the difference between Western and Africa relations versus China and Africa relations kind of makes me think of the relations between either a a robber and its victim versus a patron and the storefront. That's what it kind of feels like. So it's like the United States comes in, and at first it was kick the door down, put a gun to their face, give me everything you got in the back. But then it came to, okay, so now they come in, but now they put one of their guys on the inside behind the counter to rob the store and make it look like everything's fair. Whereas the Chinese, and from what it seems like to me, in part also the Russians, it's like they come into the store and they go, "Oh, you have these things in the back? How much are you selling it for? Okay, I'll give you this for this price. Okay, let's trade." So it feels more, camaraderie between African nations and Chinese versus the West, because the West does it, with, the Africans looking down the barrel of a gun versus Chinese, and by extension, really, Russia as well. It's really just I scratch your back, you scratch mine. That's what it feels like.
Well, I mean, I completely agree that it does look like trade between China and African nations. It looks like, there's technology, there's investment, there's infrastructure, there's the special economic zones that Africa wants. And obviously, China wants raw goods and exported materials and all kinds of other things. And I have a similar feeling to you about what the West is doing in Africa. Obviously, we can look at the 400 years of just blatant stealing and colonization. I mean, just look at what the UK did in Kenya to the Mau Mau people, and I mean, it's just obscene how terrible it was. Now, is the IMF and World Bank still doing that? I'm not sure. I meet so many people from so many different sides of the discourse that it's difficult to see if they're actually deliberately exploiting Africa or whether it's accidental to some extent. But absolutely, the process, whatever the intention is exploitative. Whereas China really does seem to be trying to actually build up these nations. I just had an expert, Astrid Haas, a Ugandan Austrian, on my show a couple of weeks ago, and she was over eager for more development projects from China. She says that there's tons of loans available, but sometimes the bottleneck is project planning. Like they can't just say we want a bridge. They have to have engineers come out and determine where the bridge should go and all the reasons should be there and all the planning from economists and so forth. So getting all of the loans that are available is sometimes difficult, and it's not always just loans. I mean, China CIDCA, it's China's answer to USAID, which is the USAID program. They do build schools, they do build hospitals. I'm documenting this is part of the new book that I'm doing, but they're also building hydropower dams, and now with solar and wind that China is better at manufacturing than anyone else in the world, it looks like Africa will be able to jump over a lot of the fossil fuel emitting technologies and
Oh,
electrify the continent using these renewable energies. And I think you're right that the United States is threatened. And I am frustrated by this because the United States should not be threatened, because a strong, powerful economy growing in the African continent is good for the United States also. And a powerful Africa means a powerful global economy.
mhm. Yeah. So something, a glitch has happened. But one of the things that I also wanted to share, I'm not sure if you have ever encountered this particular this content creator. She has been on here on RBN before, but Li Jingjing,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
actually had a stream that actually talked about how they actually also started a railway in Tanzania, and this just shows that the bond really between Africa and the African countries in China is pretty strong. I mean, because look at the benefits, and it's not just, oh, we stand with Africa. It's not just a rhetorical standing. It's actually tangibles to actually help them, but it's not in a help that's like it's not a help that's in a more paternalistic or a like almost like a parent type of paternal type of way. It's more of we have these skills and you have the resources. Let's come together. And so, I appreciate videos like this. This was actually deeply educational for me, in showing what China has been doing for African countries. And to be honest with you, I think that we need to just start looking at the deeper, broader, benefits to these countries instead of exploitation through imperialism. It's more partnership through just building each other up. And this this is something I think that honestly a lot of people should really get deeper into when it comes to thinking about the China relations with Africa. And a lot of Black people, especially here in the West, a lot of us were being coaxed into being xenophobic for the sake of the empire. For instance, there's a lot of Black people now that are now starting complaining about, undocumented immigrants, which, of course, undocumented immigration is an issue, but the issue lies in the people in power, not necessarily on the people coming, because they're also being exploited. And so this festering of, well, the Chinese are trying to take over. And it's like, no, they're not. They're actually just trying to build their part of the world up so that it's better, but also not trying to do exploitation at the same time. So that's
I
what
want
it
to
feels.
add to that. One of the things that I think about when we talk about immigration is, firstly, I'm not against immigrants, but if
Mhm.
people don't want immigration, stop bombing their countries. Why do you think they're coming to America? It's because where they are isn't safe. If you want people to stay where they are, help them build up where they are and make it, a very nice economy. People will be happier to be there then.
Yeah. Yeah. And in regards to this, I also want to share this as well. In some of these sites, I want to also say how we also have to be careful about some of these outlets and what they may say. So a lot of times they'll give some facts, mixed with some propaganda a little bit, and you guys will hear in the end the little bit of propaganda. And I'm sure, Jason, you'll be here to debunk some of that. So let's just hear this really quick. It talks about Rwanda and Rwanda being China. I don't know if that song's going to be I don't know if that song's going to be copyright claim, but it talks about 5,000, the number of local Rwandans hired to construct the Lake Kivu project. Um, and then it says the 3,000 is the number of local Nigerians hired to construct the Kefi road project. And so it says, although the projects have brought prosperity, there appear to be drawbacks. So it's like the initiative has been criticized for lacking transparency and accountability to host nations. One of my first questions is like, why would they say that there's lack of transparency and accountability? Because my thing is like they're helping building, and if they're doing things that are according to the country's regulations in regards to safety and environmental stability, why would they say something like that?
Well, this actually comes back to what I was alluding at with the IMF and the World Bank before. They have a policy of wanting to interfere in the internal economics and political situations of the recipient countries for the aid and the financing that they give. Whereas China has this policy, I called it no strings attached, but it also has a broader policy of not interfering in the internal political and economic affairs of other countries. And this is a very powerful foreign diplomacy aspect of China's foreign diplomacy that's extremely important, and why so many countries like cooperating with China in the Belt and Road and other initiatives. The United States, they have these anti-corruption networks of think tankers that their entire job is to figure out how to interfere in other countries. This is part of the National Endowment for Democracy and other related institutions. They really do want to interfere in the internal politics and economies of other countries. We know this as people who study the empire. So one of the things that China does is they're like, okay, you need this loan. It's going to be, say, $11 million to build this road. It's going to take 3-4 years to finish that. And then they go into, usually it is a Chinese company that is hired. This is truth. So China calls this win-win. So you guys get the road, we're going to finance it, or sometimes just pay for it as a grant. And we're going to use Chinese companies that are going to hire local people, do skills transfers, and build the road. Now, the United States would come in and build the same road, and then they would criticize how the government spends that money and how the internal political situation of that country works. And so China's ability to stand back and say, we don't want to run your country. We have no interest in running your country. We don't care about the political outcome. Here's the thing. China's Belt and Road Initiative is 154 members strong. It's not like when one country switches government that to a different side of the political spectrum that relationship ends, because China will still maintain the relationship with that country no matter what. And as we know, when the United States sees a government that it doesn't like, it starts cutting different kinds of ties. So the United States has a very hands-on approach where it sees things it doesn't like in foreign governments and foreign people's nations and says, we are going to interfere there. We want your government to be like this, for better, for worse, whatever it is, they want to interfere. So when they say there's a lack of transparency, it's because there are all of these American institutions that are seeking to get transparency so that they can interfere in the internal politics and economics of other countries, whereas China's like, let's build a road together. And that's really what they're doing when they agree to build that road. It's all about the road, and then project's finished, let's move on to a new project or not.
In the words of Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, well, there it is. Let's finish this up because I want to share that, because that part, I caught that part just now, but I caught the other part before when I watched this the first time, but that part I caught just now in the rewatch. So it's kind of interesting. But it says China is also Africa's largest bilateral creditor, often placing it in debt. That's what they say. It says $143 billion, the amount China has loaned to African nations since 2000. But one of the things you talked about was, and I know that this also happened with Russia, is that a lot of these loans have also been forgiven too.
I'm adding to the chat. This is a link you can go check to see where the loans have been forgiven.
Oh. All right, cool. And I will put that in the chat as well. Thank you very much. So yeah, they talked about how, they placed them in debt. Thing is, but I don't see the United States talking about the IMF or the World Bank doing the same thing.
Well, and it's very interesting. I mean, the IMF and the World Bank and China's lenders, they do give loans at concessional rates. I'm not saying that the rates are lower for China versus the IMF. The difference is that the IMF and the World Bank have this tranche system where they disperse parts of the loan in pieces. And each time they disperse part of the loan, they demand changes like, okay, we're going to build this bridge, but see this national forest you have over here? We want you to privatize that. And guess who ends up buying that forest? Some Western company. And guess who ends up destroying that forest and then exporting all of the wood? Some Western company. So that is a huge difference in the way that these operate, whether deliberately or not. The IMF and World Bank, by liberalizing foreign economies, by forcing them to be more liberal because they say it's good for these recipient countries, they're actually exploiting these countries.
Yeah, just like Congo. It's pretty sad. It says several nations have canceled or postponed proposed construction in recent years. But is that connected to China, or could that be connected to the IMF and World Bank? They don't specify here, right?
Well, I'm not sure about this specific project. I'd have to look at it specifically.
Yeah. It says Zambia.
Sometimes countries do run into economic hard times. And so sometimes China will forgive those loans or restructure those loans. I mean, but it is ultimately up to those countries to pay back the loans if they can. China doesn't want to See, here's the thing. China has an enormous amount of money, about $3.5 trillion dollars in foreign reserves, and it needs to invest that. It doesn't want to invest it in U.S. treasuries as much, so it's trying to invest that in the developing world. At 0 and 2% interest, it doesn't get a lot back. If it just dumped it in U.S. treasuries, it would make more money than it does with these projects that it's developing in the developing world. But now the money is going to develop these other countries, which are then trading more with China. As their economies rise, they trade more with China. China benefits, they benefit. The global economy benefits from China using these $3.5 trillion in foreign reserves. And so it's really a win for China to be able to invest it, but it also wants to invest it in a place where it is going to get that money back someday. Now, it does donate a lot of money for grants and that kind of aid, but it also says, okay, we're going to give you $100 billion to build this super mega dam. It does want that money to be paid back eventually. It doesn't matter if there's a small loss necessarily, or if the interest doesn't get paid or whatever, or maybe it takes a few more years if there's restructuring, but it does want that money back, because ultimately under the Belt and Road Initiative and the AIIB, this Asian Development Bank that China has established with other partners in Asia, it wants to develop these other countries. There's another reason we haven't discussed for China wanting to develop these underdeveloped countries, and that is to create a multipolar world. And for the obvious reasons that it's a lot better if you have a lot more allies around when there's one particular set of nations that is being overtly hostile. And I think we both know who we're talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have a bully in their crowd and they're big and strong and buff. And then you have a bunch of the other kids in the schoolyard and they're all skinny and scrawny. And then one kid decides to go off on his own, and then he comes back big and buff and strong. But instead of trying to bully the other kids to go in his direction, he takes all the other little scrawny kids and go, hey, come on, let me help you guys work out and get big and buff too, so that everybody else is big and buff. So then when the bullies come and they're like coming in, I'm gonna do whatever I want. Next thing you know, you have all these big buff kids that used to be scrawny and little. And now they're saying, what? What are you going to do now?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
you
that's
nailed
kind
it.
of like
Perfect analogy.
maybe think about it that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, China wants Africa to rise precisely because of that. A powerful Africa is better for the world. It creates more stability instead of this one unipolar power that used its power. I mean, look at the invasion of Iraq. Just that. The illegal invasion of Iraq killed, millions of people unnecessarily because the United States did not like that regime. I mean, that is ridiculous, and that should not be allowed. No country should be able to do that. And so, by helping facilitate a multipolar world, China is essentially creating a world that is not going to put up with that bully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, it's really for a more self-determined, strong, independent Africa, really. And because I'd say that the East, and by the East I mean China, particularly, they really want to see more autonomy within these sovereign nations. And so, because they don't like to be pushed around, and they don't want to see others pushed around. So really, it's more of a empathetic means of diplomacy that I can see, which I do applaud them for that. But one of the things you actually mentioned was, the illegal war in Iraq that happened, and that actually moves me on to one of my other questions. Now, I was talking to some friends that are also, deeply mindful about what's going on in the world, and one of the things that was asked was the relationship with Russia and the plan to counter U.S. hegemony. Now, do they see the events in Gaza as a harbinger of things to come? Because the United States has destroyed, many different Middle Eastern countries. Does China see this as a concern, or will they continue to take a back seat in this? Because one of my biggest questions is that China also seems to have a trade relationship with Israel. And if they really wanted to stop what's going on in Gaza, China could really stop, a huge amount of what's going on in Gaza just by divesting from Israel.
That's an interesting point, and there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, China has had a very strong relationship with both Palestine and with Israel. China's policy, like I've been saying, is non-interventionist, and so part of that is we're open for business. So we just had Jake Sullivan come over from the United States, basically lecturing China here in Beijing, and telling China, stop trading with Russia. You're helping Russia. And China was like, we do business with everyone. Anyone who wants to do business, China is open for business. And so we all know about the what is the right word? I forget. Divestment, the personal divestment. People have stopped buying Burger King, McDonald's, Starbucks, and so forth. That's going on here too on like a private level, but not on a national level, because China remains open for business. But in terms of what's going on and what is the war crimes that are being committed on the people of Gaza, I mean, it's clear that Israel would not be able to commit those without the bombs that are being provided by the United States in the forms of just giving them bombs, but also giving Israel money that Israel turns around and then spends on weapons from the United States. China is not exporting any weapons to Israel at all whatsoever. And if you also look at Iraq, going back to that for a moment, China just finished building 1,000 schools in Iraq. Now, this was not a grant. This was, schools for oil. But China is now committing to building 10,000 more schools for Iraq. So China wants to see a stable world. China always builds. So if Israel could ever stop committing these atrocious war crimes, I'm certain that China would want to be one of the countries that is first in to start rebuilding the infrastructure there, hospitals and schools and so forth, because China has a good track record for building schools and hospitals in the developing world. But moreover, China was already giving aid to Palestine, along with a lot of other countries around the world, before this latest round of hostilities, this bombing campaign that Israel is on. And so China has given solar panels and built schools and built wells in Palestine before. And unfortunately, this is not the right time to go in and build anything because Israel's destroying everything. But I'm certain that China wants to have a part in that. In terms of, is China going to use its economic might to punish countries? That is something that China doesn't really do. The United States is the king of tariffs and sanctions and punishing other economies when it wants a favorable outcome for something that it sees. China really is non-interventionist to the point where they're open for business.
Understood. I'm not sure if I completely agree with China continuing business with Israel. I get it. I'm not sure if I agree with it, but I see the logic behind it about being non-interventionist. But one of my other questions is regards to Vladimir Putin has invited Palestine to possibly apply to be within BRICS. As far as your expertise, what is the likelihood that you think that Palestine will be a BRICS member within the next 9 to 12 months?
I don't think I'm capable of responding to that question. I think in order to join BRICS, they probably need membership in the United Nations as a state. And China is very much for that. Xi Jinping and other leaders in China have very much said that they want to see a Palestinian state recognized in the United Nations immediately. But I mean, we know who is using their veto power against that decision, and it is not China.
Gotcha. Now, another question that was submitted to me was about China's relationship with India. Of course, India has a more rightward shift, and they are definitely more sympathetic to Western powers. Is this going to be kind of waning China's relationship with India a little bit more? Because India seems to be, especially Modi, seems to be kind of cozying up a little bit more towards the West. It feels like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not an Indian expert, although actually my entire master's degree was on India. I would say that India is actually not cozying up with the West or China. And actually, some of its behaviors look like it's doing both. India is a member of the Shanghai Coordination or Cooperation Organization, which is a local and a regional anti-terrorism task force that includes Russia, India, China, and many other countries. And India is a member of several other trade organizations that China is also a part of. And then India is also a member of this quadrilateral, which is the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, which is supposed to be something the United States hopes to contain China with. So India on one side is like very pro China, and on the other side is very pro the United States. You know, during the Cold War, India was part of an organization called the Non-Alignment Movement. It was basically the leader of this non-alignment movement, where they refused to take sides with the Soviet Union or with the United States. And I think India is still playing that same middle ground card right now. India is not really cozying up with the West because Modi just went to the Soviet Union. I mean, to Russia and met with Putin. And Modi was also in Wuhan a few years ago, meeting with Xi Jinping. So I mean, the Western news might skew it and make it look like India's on the U.S. side, but India's on India's side, and I think they're really good at maintaining relationships with everyone. I actually was talking to an Indian expert recently, and he said it's always just best to have our people in the room. So if there is an organization, a trade organization, or a security pact, they're going to join it just because they want to be in the room with everyone.
Understood. Understood. Thank you very much for that as well. My next question is this one is regarding economics, really, in China. So, as we know here in the United States, we know through conclusive data that our standards of living are in a steep decline. In 2023, we had a 12% increase in homelessness here in the United States. And just, as we found out, the home ownership rate among millennials is just slightly above 50%. I am a millennial, so I don't own a home, and I'm part of that, 50% that doesn't own homes. But meanwhile, in China, there is a tweet that was put out that talks about home ownership of millennials is over 70%. So my question is, what is China doing better than the US for its people?
The United States and China are obviously different stages of their economic development because the United States is a developed country, and so it's dealing with different problems. This is actually interesting because it's millennials. The home ownership in China is actually 90%, and this is just for millennials specifically. And 80% of all homeowners in China don't have a mortgage. So it's even more extreme than this. Kathleen is a friend of mine, by the way. Yeah, she's brilliant.
Jason, can you repeat that about mortgages again?
Home ownership in China is 90%. Oh, that's actually in her tweet right there. And 80% have no mortgage. Yeah, she's tweeted the same data.
80% of Chinese homeowners don't even have a mortgage.
Yeah, don't have a mortgage at all. I could talk about my personal experience. My wife and I, we bought a home in Wuhan. Our home was 400,000. It was unmodeled. That's 400,000 RMB. So that's like $80,000. And then we spent another 200,000 RMB, which is like $40,000 to fix it up. And it is a 2-story apartment. So I mean, we're on like the 20th floor overlooking the city. It's fabulous. So I mean, in Beijing, you're going to pay 5 million RMB, or Shanghai, Shenzhen, 4, 5, 6 million RMB, which is like $800,000. But if you go to basically any of these tier 2 cities, so think about it like this. Let's imagine Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles are tier 1 cities. So by analogy, those homes would be $1 million each. But then if you went to Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Baltimore, whatever, then the cost of a home would be like $100,000. So China is still a developing country, and so everything is cheaper because of that. The per capita income for someone in the United States is considerably higher It's like at least 3 times higher than people in China. The average, the median income, even though you guys are dealing with inflation, which is making your purchasing power go down a lot. So families in China are also super savers. They save about 40% of their income, whereas Americans tend to save 10 to 20% of their income. So when a kid, and there's only usually 1 or 2 child families, buys their first home, parents are there to give them half of the money too, because they've been saving their whole life, and it's part of their culture to help their kids buy a home. So there's all kinds of other factors, cultural factors, developmental factors, so it's a completely different economic situation. One of the problems with Westerners, Western economists, even really good Western economists, is they look at China and they apply Western economic models to it and then misunderstand it. So there's a lot of that too. But yeah, Chinese people tend to own their own homes. They tend to own nice homes, and a lot of them tend to own more than one home.
Wow. Man, that is crazy. And I'm just thinking, as a millennial, I would love to be able to own my own home, but I just can't afford it. And the fact is that, and one of the things I was speaking to Danny Hyphone, and one
Oh
of the
yeah,
things, yeah, he was
he's in
talking
he's
about
in
how,
Xinjiang right now.
yeah,
So yeah.
he was in Xinjiang a couple days ago, I think it was. Yeah, he was partying with the Uyghurs. It was great. He was playing basketball with Uyghurs and Uyghur Muslims as well. But one of the things that he was talking about is that it's relatively no homelessness in China, and their
There are
version of
homeless.
homelessness
There are
isn't
homeless,
the same.
but it's
Go
very,
ahead.
very, very, very few. I get called out because we say these kinds of things on the internet. People attack me all the time. Oh, there are homeless people in China. So there are just very, 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 very few.
So it's much smaller in comparison to their population than it is to ours.
I would say it's actually
That's good.
lower in total number. I think it's 650,000 right now in the United States,
Yeah,
which was 500,000 a couple of years ago. Like you said, 12% increase over time.
yeah,
But even there are people sleeping under bridges. Like a couple of my friends, a friend who wrote a book, Why the World Needs China, Kyle Farana, he said, oh, I went looking for homeless and there weren't any. That's like, he was only here for a couple of weeks. There are
yeah.
homeless in China, but they're very, very, very few. But here's the thing. I went to feed some homeless people one time here in Beijing, and I found this lady who obviously needed help. So I gave her a sandwich, and her response was to deconstruct the sandwich on the ground into little pieces and count them. And then, so I mean, it's obvious that the only people left that are homeless are in need of serious mental help as well. They need to have caretakers. There's not just homeless people here because they need a job or something. They're legitimately don't know how to be part of society, and so their needs are considerably different than most people's. Whereas in the United States, you have people who were working really hard to try to pay their bills, and now they can't afford it and they're living in a tent. And that is ridiculous. I mean, obviously there's need for mental health institutions to take care of people here in China, but it is just considerably less. I mean, I could walk around for days in Beijing before I finally see a homeless person again. Whereas when I was in San Francisco, you could walk around for minutes before you see your next homeless person.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Orlando. I don't know if that would consider tier 2 or tier 3 type of city. Probably 3, but all I have to do is go outside my door, go down maybe a block or two, and I'm already walking into homeless people.
Hmm.
And it's pretty sad,
You know,
and a lot of
there's a
them
whole,
also have their own jobs.
it's not just about the economy. It is also about culture, and it's different. Like in the United States, back in the 80s, I don't know how it is now. I think more people are living at home now with mom and dad. But back in the 80s, you turned 18, mom said, get out. It's time for you to go make your way in the world. That's the American way. That's the way it used to be anyway. Everyone go out and make your own life. Now it's your turn. You go prove that you're a man or a woman or whatever. But in China, it's not like that. It's like, okay, well, I still haven't made it yet. I'll just keep living at home. And that's the way it's been for generations. That's part of Chinese culture. So if
Yeah,
someone runs into trouble, their relatives will always take them back in a heartbeat. Cousins, uncles, grandparents, it's not the same. In America, you're ashamed maybe if you're a 40-year-old and you have to move it back in with your mom. But in China, if you're a 40-year-old and you need to move back in with your mom, no one even bats an eye. It's nothing.
Yeah, that's actually quite beautiful. I mean, that's really just Western culture in itself, because even in places like, you can go in different parts of Europe and that's considered to be normal. If you still live with your family and you don't, and you're not married, I mean, that's considered normal in places like India and China, Sri Lanka and Thailand. Is the same in many African countries. It's like we're the only ones that kick our young out right when they're legally an adult. It's only because they're legally an adult. Because otherwise, then we get in trouble if we kick them out at 16 or 17. So, it's true. It's true. And the problem is that we do not, like, for instance, if the human brain is not fully developed by the age of 25, why are we kicking out somebody who's under the age of their brain being fully developed? That doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. And then on top of it, different cultures outside the West are also saying that that's crazy. Why are we doing that? And on top of it, we should also have more villages and tribes so that we can take better care of each other, even beyond that age of becoming an adult. Because it's one thing I told somebody, and I'll get to my next question, was the old African proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child, right? They say it takes a village to raise a child. But I add on to it and I say, but it takes a village to maintain a person. The problem is that we've walked away from that village. We've walked away from it because the system demands individualism, when in reality, we are built as a society to be collectivist. That's just human nature. And so when we walk away from that, we're literally walking away from our own humanity. And from what I see from countries like China, they're trying to maintain that collectivist mindset and say, no, we're a collective species. And one of the best things I actually appreciate about China, and I know China's not perfect, but there is collective prosperity that they're actually pushing and promoting. It's not individual prosperity, and I think that's something that we can definitely learn here in the West, because if we start to look at each other as a collective, then we can do the same, if not better than China. But we just don't have that same mindset.
I would just want to, I know you're about to ask a question, but I just want to interrupt that and say that's one of the really frustrating things about people like us who are very critical of the United States. It's not that we dislike the United States, it's that the United States has so much unmet potential. We could do so much good if we just did it. I mean, it's just crazy sometimes.
Yeah. No, I look, it's like I love the United States too much to let it fall the way it's going.
Bingo.
Yeah. So now the next one I want to get to is on the subject of tariffs. So just so that everybody has an idea, because look, not everybody who watches these shows may not know the definitions of certain things, because either they were taught it back in the day or they don't know it now. But what's the difference between a tariff and a tax? So first off, I just want to get into that. So the difference between taxes and tariffs: a definition of a tax is a mandatory cost added to any imported product, service, or wealth coming into the country. Sorry, let me just enlarge this so that everybody can see very well. And then a tariff is a type of tax added to imports to control how freely a product can be imported into the country. Says a tax is a standard percentage rate applied to all products being imported. And then a tariff is a calculated based on the type of product as determined by the HTS code and certificate of origin. And then it says the importance is the main role is to raise revenue for the local government. And the main goal for tariffs is to encourage consumption of domestic products. Now, with that being said, when it comes to tariffs on Chinese goods, This is an act that was done by former President Trump and now by current President Biden, putting tariffs on Chinese goods. So you have aluminum, steel, semiconductors, electric vehicles, batteries, battery components, minerals, solar cells, ship-to-shore cranes, and medical products. My question to you is, who do these tariffs ultimately affect? And does the benefit outweigh the disadvantage?
This is such a complicated subject, but I want to try to cover a few things. What's really interesting is it doesn't hurt China. And that's one of the things the United States was hoping to do, encourage domestic growth of industries. The United States, Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce, she really wants the United States to make EVs, the United States to make solar panels, the United States to make all of these things. But it's still okay to buy from third-party countries. So China is manufacturing most of the goods, sending them to places like Vietnam and Thailand, Mexico, and then they're getting finished and then imported to the United States as goods from Mexico, Vietnam, and Thailand. So Americans are essentially just paying this tax as a tariff on these goods, and they're still coming into the United States, but they're going through these third-party countries like Mexico and Vietnam. So the United States consumers are paying more for the same goods. China's still making out fine. The United States is not growing these industries domestically very well. And these third-party countries are the largest beneficiaries because they're getting all of these jobs to finish these goods and then ship them to the United States, where U.S. consumers are paying a lot more for them, both to the federal government as a hidden tax on goods, but also to help develop these third-party countries. And so I see it actually as not so bad for the world, because the United States is essentially having to pay a tax to Vietnam and Mexico to help build up their economies. But it is not good for the U.S. economy, because U.S. consumers should be able to buy these affordable goods. But there is something that is happening lately that I think is very fascinating, and that is Chinese companies are now coming to the United States and setting up factories in the United States to manufacture goods that are tariffed from being imported from China. So there's an example in Texas, and there's an example in Arizona, there's an example in Ohio, where there are Chinese companies coming in and joint venturing, JVing with American companies to make solar panels in the United States, which gives Americans jobs, and they're good factory jobs. And then they're making solar in the United States for the United States. And so I think it's actually, that's beneficial for the United States. I would like to, if I was living in America and I was the consumer in this economy, I would be really upset that I couldn't buy an affordable EV from China, because let me give you an example. There is an EV from China right now, which is a hybrid. It uses gas and electricity, but it can drive 2,000 kilometers on one charge and one tank of gas. Can you imagine that as a consumer? And this is an affordable car. This is a car that costs 12 or 13,000 US. Can you imagine buying a brand new, nice car for 12 or 13,000 dollars US and being able to drive it like across 4 states before it ran out of gas? I feel bad for American consumers, but is it going to help the United States with domestic manufacturing? It's not doing that so far, not really. So we'll have to see if it is going to help them. And the real thing is the United States is also trying to punish China. And all this is doing is China's just shifting its buyers to other countries. So not only is these products going through third-party countries, but now Africans are buying EVs from China. In fact, some of the EV factories are being set up in these special economic zones in Africa, and Africans are now making their own EVs for domestic consumption with Chinese technology. So it's a very complex question that you're asking, but so far it looks like U.S. consumers are the biggest losers.
Okay, so it sounds like the United States is shooting itself in the foot.
That's what it looks like, yeah. But maybe it will spur domestic consumption, or there'll be a bill to help American factories make similar products, but so far, not really.
But I honestly do not think that will happen, because we live in a system where it is dominated by finance capital, and the ability to make manufacturing, the big corporations are not going to want to do that, because that means that they're going to have to pay factory workers a decent living wage, which they don't want to do. And if the United States were to have a factory, then unfortunately, these big corporations are going to want to import undocumented immigrants to come in to do the work so that they can exploit them and lowball them. And then these workers who are undocumented, they can't revolt, they can't, organize, because they'll be afraid to be deported. And so if we did bring manufacturing here in the United States, it's either going to happen through the exploited labor of undocumented immigrants, or they're going to exploit the labor of prison labor, which is slavery here in the United States, in order to create these goods, here in the United States. Because a lot of times, a lot of people don't realize that when you see something that says made in the USA, this doesn't say how it's made. Because a lot of times when it says made in the USA, a prisoner made that under duress, meaning that they were threatened with, oh, well, if you don't go into the factory and help make this, well, they're going to add to your sentence, or we're going to put you in solitary. And so
they sell them goods. You have to pay for your soap. You have to pay for your toothbrush. Then you have to work to pay for those. If you can't pay for them, they add to your sentence. So you have to keep working to pay for them. It's insane. The American prison system is basically legal slavery.
Yeah. So ultimately, like, if the manufacturing were to happen, it would have to be because we changed the system here in the United States. I don't see it any other way. So this is why, if the in order for the United States to truly be competitive, we have to get rid of the system of corporatocracy that we currently have. That's the only way I can see it.
There's a professor named he's a lecturer named Mitch Presnick, who lectures for Harvard, and his idea is we should let Chinese products come in to leverage them to make our economy better, and then find other technologies to support the growth of the U.S. economy. And I agree with that. That's a much better idea. The United States needs solar now, not just because it's the right thing to do for the environment. I mean, that's a huge component for a lot of people, but it's also AI uses an enormous amount of energy, and the United States is trying to become competitive in AI, and most of the US electric grid needs much more electricity right now, and China has made solar so incredibly cheap that it doesn't make sense to do without it.
Yeah. And just one more thing before I let you go, because I wanted to touch on this as well. And I talked about this story a few weeks back. This smacked me across the face when I saw it. And I really think that the United States is shooting themselves in the foot, even when it comes to our health. This came out about world first diabetes cure with cell therapy achieved in China. And one of the things that I hated was that they're trying to prevent, researchers and scientists in the United States to collaborate with Chinese scientists. And really, this has been done through stem cell and stem cell technology. And if we had better relations with China and saw China as a collaborator instead of an enemy or an adversary, then this would be great for the entire world, especially in the West.
Absolutely, certainly. There's a lot of technologies that are coming to fruition here in China that the United States does not yet have. And that is, I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of things that there are actually. And we're getting to the point where I know that Tesla's releasing robots, and there are some robots in the United States. I've seen videos of them, but I don't think people understand how ubiquitous robots have become in China. Like, if you go to stay in any hotel, there are robots there that bring you your things and stuff. So we have delivery. So I can pick up my phone. Right now it's 1 a.m. It's 1:59 a.m. I could order like all kinds of food, and it'll just come to my apartment in like 30 minutes. But if you're staying in a hotel, when the food arrives, it doesn't just get run up to your room. They put it in a robot, and that robot brings it to your room and knows how to use the elevator. It comes straight to your room, and it calls your phone inside your room and your room rings. And I mean, just robots are everywhere. I mean, it's not just stem cells, it's everything. China is really, the United States has all the same technology, but China is scaling it up because China is the world's factory and just building the crap out of it. So China has all of these kinds of things. China is now the leader in, I think, 90% of all critical technology in the world also. So there is also technology here in China that doesn't exist elsewhere. And I, like you, would love to see more Chinese and American scientists collaborating in China and in the United States. The problem is we have this McCarthyist fear of China in the United States right now. And so you have these Nobel laureate like type scientists working in the United States and being persecuted by the FBI. It's crazy.
Wow, man. We're trying to change things in the United States one day at a time, and hopefully we can actually do more collaborations. I would like to see more friendly competition with China, especially when it comes to, green technology and actually ushering the world forward. And we can only do that by not being adversaries, but being friends.
I agree with you.
Yep. So I just want to thank you so very much. This has been an enlightening stream. It has also been a humbling stream, letting me know how much I don't know. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, James. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so very much. Everybody, if you guys would like to, you guys can also go to Jason Smith. He also is an author as well. If you guys would like to, I will also put your link to your Twitter in the chat as well, so that people can look at you and see exactly what you have going on as well.
Thank you, James.
All right. Take care. Have a good one. All right. So let me make sure that I have that as well. One of the things I also think that is important is that we talk about whenever you hear, fear mongering in regards to China, I honestly think that we need to shut it down, try to find, the objective facts about China. And then, let people know, look, this is not true. And this is what is going on in China as well. If you guys, come across it, find people like Jason Smith who can actually put out the objective facts about what's going on in China, so that you won't, so that we don't end up having some, State Department narrative that's pushing us to go to war over Taiwan, or trying to make it seem like Chinese are trying to take over the world. This red peril that we see all the time. I think it's important that we shut those down, because ultimately, like for instance, one of the reasons why I asked about the whole debt trap issue is because, we're constantly being told this, and then it causes a lot of people, particularly us Black people here in the United States, to look at China and go, oh, well, you guys are trying to do horrible things to our ancestors in Africa, when in reality, it's not actually that way. And so I think that's what's important to look at, things like him. You have Carl Jha, you have Danny Haifeng, you have many others that are also talking about what's going on in China. So please make sure to pay them more attention. And now, this is not to say that China is perfect. No country is perfect, but it's better to get the objective truth from people who are actually on the ground there, than from people who either speculate, or some detractors who are just trying to make it here in the West. And you know who those people are. So thank you very much again to Mr. Jason Smith for coming on. So if you guys have not already, go ahead and give a like to this video. Appreciate it very, very much as well. It helps us out deeply. Thank you so very much for that. I want to get into the chat, and we're going to say hello to some people, and we're also going to get some of the thoughts regarding this particular subject. So we have Cobra Commander coming in with some love. Thank you so very much. We have Pittsburgh Dude says JB bringing the drip today. I did red out of respect for China. So I was like, hey, let's do China red. We have Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, everyone. Terry Connolly says, hello, JB and fam. Good to see you, Terry Connolly. We have Robbie Burns coming in saying, hey, all. Not yo mama says, peace and cheers. All right. We have Randy says, the insatiable greed of the 1% is responsible for every ounce of pain and suffering in this world. Thank you very much for that, Randy. Sorry about that. The ginger is strong in my tea. We have Pulling the String says most of the debt trap nonsense comes from America because they are losing out to China. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up as well, was that every accusation is a confession. And when the United States says, oh, well, they're just China's just doing debt traps in Africa. And it's like, the West is doing debt traps. Every accusation is a confession. And just ask, a lot of these experts in geopolitics, excuse me, about how the IMF and World Bank puts them in debt traps that they'll never be able to pay back. And then these African countries are constantly in debt and can't provide for their own people because they're so busy trying to pay back the IMF and the World Bank. So then what? And so when you hear countries like Russia and China forgiving the debt of these African nations and just saying, oh, well, you know what? We gave you a loan to build this road, this bridge, this water treatment facility, and we loaned it to you. You know what? You're free and clear. You got it. It's yours. Don't worry, we got it. It's good. And then they have that water treatment facility, or they have that road, they have that bridge, they have that railroad track and those trains so that they can actually build themselves up. And guess what? They remember that, right? Mozambique will remember that. Zambia will remember that. Nigeria will remember that. And so then guess what? When China comes back in, they're like, hey, China, hey, Russia, what's good, fam? All right, well, you know what? We were able to build ourselves up a little bit, and now we have this legitimate business where we can actually take some of our minerals and we'll sell it to you for a decent price as long as our people get paid enough. And then they give them the minerals, and then China will, or Russia will give them in trade something that is fair, and next thing you know, the country gets built up even more. And so it's just like the United States, they say that they do that, but it's really by putting a puppet in to give to the corporations at a cheaper rate that's damn near free. And then who ends up suffering is the people in that country, versus, I bet you this, and I'll move on after this. If a Kwame Nkrumah, a Thomas Sankara, if people like them were still alive and running their respective countries, they would have a very close relationship with China. A very, very close relationship. Meaning that, let's say, right, let's say Thomas Sankara was still running Burkina Faso, and they took their minerals and started doing trade with China. But the mineral sales were actually being disseminated. The money was being disseminated to all the people, the Burkinabe people. Do you know how much better off the people in Burkina Faso would be by now? If the Nigerians were actually having trade with China for, let's say, the last 30 years, do you know how much better Nigeria would be? instead of having to trade with these Western pirates. Man, I'm telling you, that's the thing I'm thinking about. Thank you very much for pulling strings. SCH says there is something called the China African Development Fund, which is great, but there's Chinese companies that aren't part of that, and that sucks. Not many, though. Gotcha. Thank you so very much. Zoya, thank you so very much, Zoya. Zoya is love, says Russia and China aren't America. They will not impose their will on sovereign countries. They're strategic and helping Palestine for decades. They're changing the world order to benefit everyone. Understood. Thank you very much. Einstein Universe says the obesity rate is over 50% in USA compared to 3% in China. Yeah, that's another thing. But at the same time, the obesity rate here in the United States, part of it is driven by the capitalist need to get more people to consume more. They're not fine with us consuming just a reasonable amount and then they make a profit off of it. Capitalism is a system that requires infinite growth on a planet with finite resources. So if you are, a sugar, if you're part of the sugar industry and your shareholders need to make 3% year over year, and then you reach that max, that ceiling, well, then you need consumers to want more sugar. Well, how do you do that? Well, you add more sugar to your products, and then it causes an addiction for more sugar, because ultimately the sugar industry is just a bunch of drug dealers. Think about it. It's an addiction, right? And so therefore, addiction to sugar is essentially a drug addiction. So, things like caffeine is also a drug addiction. Let's be real, right? And so these companies, these industries in the West, they're going to push that as much as they can so they can get that 3% year over year, so that they can get their dividend checks and they can get those higher dividend checks ultimately, and to me, that's immoral, because now you're manipulating humans in order to create more profit. And the fact that if this figure is true, 3% obesity rate in China compared to 50% obesity rate in the United States, I mean, the Chinese see, the pushing of salt, fat, and sugar in our diets for more profit as immoral. And to be honest with you, I think we need to go by that same model. How does it benefit us in order, to keep us healthy? If it doesn't benefit us to keep us healthy, then no, we shouldn't be pushing that industry, to make more profit. It's the same thing with the profit motive in healthcare. Like, why is there a profit motive in healthcare in the first place? Doesn't make any sense to me. Zoya says more than 70% of Russians, according to a Vits.IOM survey in 2020, own a house. Life in America is a travesty. Yeah, I heard about that too. I think it was Tara Reid was talking about it. I think she was talking to Savvy about that, about how a huge portion of Russians actually own their own home, which is amazing to me. And it just goes to show that we're not dreaming big enough in the United States. We just aren't. Oh, man. Thank you very much for the tip. Sorry, for the super chat, Roger. He says, is China willing to let those plants be worker? Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would hope so. I would really hope so, but I would hope so. Knowing how, but the thing is, like, would it be a state Chinese company, or would it be private Chinese? See, that's the difference, right? I would hope, that they will be trying to implement worker co-ops. But knowing these people and these corporations here in the United States, if China tried to come in and import, and put in worker co-ops here, oh, they'd go to war with them through Taiwan tomorrow, knowing them. Because let a worker get power like that in a co-op. Let a worker get just a little bit more power like in a worker co-op. Oh, it's over. It's over. Because then we're going to go, wait a minute, I don't need to have my work, my surplus value exploited and taken away from me. But right now, this empire is 248 years old. It's at the end of its life cycle. It's over. So yeah, I honestly, I would love to see that, but I don't know if it's going to happen, Roger. I would like to, though, but. All right, so let me check on the Rumble. I'm sorry, the Rockfin side, and I'm gonna check to see if we have any Rumble rants. If we don't, then we can move on to the second story that we have. Ooh, y'all are a beautiful chatty bunch in here. I love it though. All right, thank you so very much. All right, let's get on to the next story. Let me check to see if there's any super chats that I missed. I didn't miss any, did I? Sorry. Just think about me, myself, and I. All right, so let's get into the next subject. We're going to talk about. I'm gonna laugh my ass off on this one. This is going to be so funny, baby. Oh my goodness, flip flopping Don. Woo! Floridians are not happy with him. Well, a lot of Floridians are not happy with Donald Trump right now, baby. He just. Oh, he let some hearts down over the weekend. Gotta wet my whistle because we about to get into this one. MAGA is pissed with Donald. They are mad. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you right now. I want to get into this because I saw this happening, and when I first saw it, it was a lot. Like, even my brain was going haywire. So let me see. So let's first go here. So as far as Donald Trump's concerned, so here in Florida, of course, Donald Trump is a resident. There's two different ballot initiatives that are going to be on the ballot here in November. So first, we're going to start off on the ballot initiative, which is Amendment 4. Now, if you guys been following my channel, I actually been going over the Florida ballot initiatives for 2024. Ballot Initiative Amendment 4 actually talks about basically restoring the right to abortion up to the point of viability, right? Viability means up to basically 24 weeks. We had it before up to 24 weeks here in Florida, but that got taken away by Ron DeSantis. So now we're at a 6-week abortion ban. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, particularly those of us with testes, is that when women find out they're pregnant, they find out they're pregnant around 6 weeks. They don't know because, well, they have to wait until they miss their period. And so within 28 days, which is 4 weeks, then 2 weeks, if they're late, guess what? That's 6 weeks. So a lot of them don't realize that. And so Donald Trump was asked about the 6-week abortion ban and in response to what's going on with the 6-week abortion ban that was implemented by Ron DeSantis. And Donald Trump had to say this.
You overturned,
everyone does.
I think Roe, does, yeah. And you want abortion to be a states' rights issue. In Florida, the state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6 week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I'm voting that I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. Look, just so you understand, everybody wanted Roe v. Wade terminated for years, 52 years. I got it done. They wanted it to go back to the states. Exceptions are very important for me, for Ronald Reagan, for others that have navigated this very, very interesting and difficult path.
You overturned,
everyone does.
I think Roe, does, yeah. And you want abortion to be a states' rights issue. In Florida, the state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6 week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So MAGA's in a tizzy over this one. It is hilarious. This happened, and it was kind of adding insult to injury, because Donald Trump also came out in favor of essentially paying for IVF treatment as well. And a lot of evangelicals and MAGA people, they are against IVF treatment. And so they got upset. And so this to them was adding insult to injury as far as IVF and abortion. They really just got mad because the fact is that Trump realized that, it's too short, right? I mean, most women don't even know they're pregnant until 6 weeks. So how are you going to put abortion ban for that? And then he also talked about in cases of rape, incest, and things like that, right? So the funny part is Donald Trump actually went to the left of Ron DeSantis, and MAGA went wild. Now, let me share this as well, because, and I'm gonna be honest with you, from a conservative standpoint, this actually sounds reasonable. I'm not a conservative at all, but this actually sounded reasonable, and this is what he said.
I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women, IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely. And for this same reason, we will also allow new parents to deduct major newborn expenses from their taxes, so that parents that have a beautiful baby we'll be able. So we're pro-family. Nobody's ever said that before. But the IVF treatments are expensive. It's very hard for many people to do it and to get it. But I've been in favor of IVF right from the beginning. I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization.
I'm going to preface this by saying I am not voting for Donald Trump. I am not voting for Kamala Harris. Do I feel that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are deplorable human beings? Yes. But Donald Trump proposing this is a very good slippery slope. It is a fantastic slippery slope. Especially the part about the administration or the government paying for healthcare. So then it goes, well, if they can pay for healthcare in regards to IVF, then why can't they do it for cancer treatments? Oh, if we can do it for cancer treatments, then why can't we do it for diabetes and medications and make sure that people who for diabetes treatments? Or if we could pay for that, then we can start paying for other different healthcare costs too. That's a slippery slope into socialized medicine. That's a slippery slope into a single payer healthcare system. Do you get my drift? And MAGA lost their minds. And it's really the people who are higher up in MAGA. Like, I honestly do not think that people who are the regular rank and file Republicans who are on board with Trump, I don't think they see this as a bad thing. It's like healthcare for us without having to pay a huge amount. Cool. But the people who are higher up on the economic ladder, they're mad. They're pissed. They're tweeting, till their thumbs bleed right now. No, Donald Trump, what are you doing? You can't do this. If you do this, then that's against our values. But he just said it promotes the more babies being born. But then he also says, well, I want more weeks. Because the thing is that now you're punishing women, in regards to, those who may have endured rape or incest and things like that. Or if they're just finding out that they're pregnant and now by the time they find out it's too late. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. So that happened, I want to say Thursday-ish, Friday, that happened. And I was on dialysis and I was looking at my phone and I was cracking up. But then, because MAGA had such a huge uproar over this, Donald Trump reversed. Now, let me go to here because that role reversal was interesting. So let me go to this. Because I saw this and I was just like, oh, you wuss. You wuss. See, here's the thing. Everybody talks about how Donald Trump just does what he wants and not a care in the world. He doesn't care what other people think. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He cares. He cares what people think. Here's Donald Trump basically running with his tail between his legs after saying that he would actually was in favor of more weeks.
Disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it. At the same time, the Democrats are radical because the 9 months is just a ridiculous situation that where you can do an abortion in the 9th month. And, you know, some of the states like Minnesota and other states have it where you could actually execute the baby after birth.
First of all, here's the thing. That is absolutely patently false. Now, Donald Trump is trying to cover his ass by lying to you. That's the issue. Amendment 4, trust me, I've actually read it. I covered it on my channel. Amendment 4 is to bring back the same law that we had before the 6-week ban to bring it back right before fetal viability, which means 24 weeks. Pregnancy is 39 weeks. There's nothing at all in the ballot initiative about 39 weeks, not even 30 weeks, not even 28, 29 weeks. No, it's 24 weeks, which is right before there is fetal viability. What is fetal viability? Basically, if a fetus is born before 24 weeks outside of the body, it dies. The chances of it dying are extremely high. Versus after 24 weeks, the chances start to drop. And so when he says it's by the 9th month, that is bullshit. And there's nothing in any laws that are being proposed through ballot initiatives that say anything up to birth. And you'll hear that same lie from people like him, as well as many other different Republicans and Ron DeSantis. So Donald Trump is lying to you. Look at the actual language of the bill, the language of the ballot initiative. And that will tell you exactly what you need to know. That's what it is. Don't listen to him. Right? He's lying to you. Now, let's continue.
And all of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
So he said he wanted more weeks. He said he wanted more weeks, right? So it would go from a 6-week ban to 24 weeks, right? Which is back to where we were pre-Ron DeSantis ban. And now, because MAGA basically had an uproar, well, he had to ring it in, right? Because does Trump really have a principled stance on things? No, he doesn't. He flip-flops like a fish out of water. He flip-flops like Kamala Harris. Now, that being said, there was something else that happened that caused MAGA also to go into a tizzy. So now they're kind of quelling down on this one. They're like, oh, okay, he reversed. Okay. All right. He said he's not going to vote yes on Amendment 4. But he didn't say the same thing about Amendment 3. Oh my goodness. Let's get into this. This is going to be interesting. Y'all, they're mad. They're big mad. Let's get into this. Let me share this with you. So I want to share this. This is Donald Trump, what he said here. So he said this on Truth Social. He says, As everyone knows, I was and will be again the most respected law and order president in U.S. history. We will take our streets back by being tough and smart on violent and all other types of crime. In Florida, like so many other states that have already given their approval, personal amounts of marijuana will be legalized for adults with Amendment 3. Whether people like it or not, this will happen through the approval of the voters, should be done correctly. We need the state legislator to responsibly create laws that will prohibit the use of it in public spaces so we do not smell marijuana everywhere we go like we do in Democrat-run cities. First of all, let me ask you guys this. For those of you in Democrat-run cities, like St. Louis or Kansas City, like where Nick is, y'all smell weed everywhere? Do you? Because a lot of people smoke it here. I don't smell it everywhere. And yes, I'm in Florida. And a lot of people still do it, even though it's not legalized recreationally. What would really change? So the right wingers, their objection is it's going to smell bad. I don't hear y'all seeing the same thing about cigarettes, but let's move on. He says, at the same time, someone should not be a criminal in Florida when this is legal in so many other states. This is the part I want to focus on. Donald Trump said, at the same time, someone should not be a criminal in Florida when this is legal in so many other states. He says, we do not need it to ruin lives and waste taxpayer dollars, arresting adults with personal amounts of it on them. And no one should grieve a loved one because they died from fentanyl-laced marijuana. We will make America safe again. That's what Donald Trump said. And MAGA lost their collective, ever-loving minds. So this lady says, what the F? Trump wants weed legalized in Florida in the same post as saying he will be the most law and order. Becoming more permissive is why California is a shithole. Why can't Trump just stay out of Florida politics? He's running for president, not governor. So they're mad. They're mad because Donald Trump is literally saying, if the voters want to legalize weed, then hey, then I guess we should have it legal. Just make sure it's done in a safe way. I have no objections to that. Now, what about me? Do I think it should be legalized? Yes. And do I agree with it being legal for those 21 years of age and older? Yeah. Yeah. And the main primary reason why I think it should be legalized for 21 years of age and older is because the brain does not stop developing until the ages of 24, 25. But I'll accept 21 years of age because the thing is that once you start consuming it, it could alter the growth of your brain. And I want you to be able to have, healthy brain growth, right? That's the reason why, right? Because scientifically, I feel like you should, kind of stay away from it until you're of age, right? With that being said, yeah, you're a full-grown adult. Why not? See, here's the thing. I do believe in autonomy when it comes to personal liberties. The same people who talk about their body, their choice during the pandemic, they don't believe in that when it comes to taking in a mind-altering substance. They're cool with mind-altering substances when it comes in a shot glass. They're cool with mind-altering substances when it comes in a coffee cup or an espresso cup. But let it be in a bong, and they're saying that's wrong. It doesn't make any sense. And that's the crazy part. The fact that Donald Trump is actually on board with this is kind of rich. Now, do I really think that Donald Trump is, all about personal liberties like that? Not really. I mean, he just goes with the way the wind blows, right? But I just find it hilarious that you have all these people who say that they are on board with liberty, but then once he actually expressed something that promotes liberty, then is considered to be wrong. Here's another MAGA person that's losing their jingle bells. Jenna says, "No, what is he doing? Recreational marijuana has ruined blue states. Just because blue states are stupid doesn't mean Florida should be. If users don't like it, move. Don't California, Florida. No on Amendment 3. I thought it was about states' rights, though. He's a resident, right? I thought it was about, we should do states' rights. Okay, states' rights. Okay, if we want to legalize them, then all right, cool. He's expressing his opinion. Oh, but when it goes against what you don't want, now it's a problem. The hypocrisy of it all. Let's continue on. Let me see. Let me see if there's another one I have. Yeah. So let me share this as well. So John says, so Trump is voting for unrestricted abortions in Florida and wants the government to pay for IVF. By the way, just to let you guys know, before Trump flip-flopped on it, the Amendment 4 is not unrestricted abortions. I should just pull up Amendment 4 so that people know what's what. I'll do that in a second. He says, if you guys don't think this is hemorrhage voters from the pro-life movement and those who are against socialized medicine, you're kidding yourselves. This is leftism. I thought healthcare for all was being pro-human, pro-worker. Like, here's my thing. If healthcare for all would stop the amount of mortality, infant mortality, especially among Black people, especially among Black women, right? Then isn't that being America first? Making sure that we all have healthcare so that we don't have to die from a lack of it. Making sure that we all have healthcare without having to have it through our jobs. Isn't that more of an America first position? Wouldn't it be more of an America first position to, if he wants to bring it back to the states, then the states saying this is what we want? So now it's really just the super ultra conservative saying, this person Melody says, I think that most of the voters that he's trying to get don't like him no matter how far left he goes. it's funny. When people pay attention to the policies, you know, the person who delivers it, as long as they're willing to do the actual policy that's in the right direction, a lot of people don't really care as much. I mean, we can see that, from some Black people. Now, I don't agree with voting for the two-party system because they aren't ultimately going to do anything for us, right? With that being said, the fact that he's proposing an actual reasonable policy in order to, for people to, their personal liberties to be respected, even if he's doing it in a way that is, how can I say it? Even though he's doing it in a way that is more self-serving, he's doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? And now some people are upset about it. Here's Savvy. She said, just as I predicted, Trump has flip-flopped on abortion again. Once he received backlash from his base, he's voting no against Florida abortion measure. Both Kamala and Trump are flip-floppers who crumble under pressure. Vote Joe Stein 2024. And so, yeah, it's like they flip-flop so much that they really don't have a stance, a strong stance, principle stance on the issues. And this is why we talk about leaving the duopoly. Because if they don't have strong stances on these issues, if they'll go the way the wind blows, or they'll go the way their donors or the bribers will push them, they're really not any good for any of us at all. Because ultimately what they're going to do is they're going to sell you out to the highest bidder. And no matter who says positive things about the duopoly, even if somebody comes on this channel and says that Donald Trump is an anti-war president, just recognize that that person is bullshitting you and that person is lying to you. If anybody tells you that Kamala Harris is actually trying to work tirelessly for a ceasefire, they're bullshitting you. They're lying to you. And so realize that if somebody's advocating for Donald Trump, they're no different than somebody advocating for Kamala Harris. And somebody is advocating for Kamala Harris is no different than somebody advocating for Donald Trump, because ultimately they do roughly the same things. If you're going to argue for one side or the other side of the duopoly, you're arguing for the duopoly. So, with that being said, the fact is that you're seeing who Donald Trump is, the flip-flopper in chief. Now, just because he flips on something and goes in the direction that I think is correct, it also shows that some people may say, well, he's adapting to the opinions of the people. But the thing is like the opinions of the people may go in a way in which he doesn't like. Will he adapt and go with them according to that? I honestly don't think that Donald Trump has ironclad principles. If he did, then he would have stuck to his guns on certain issues. And then there wouldn't be this much ambiguity and trying to wonder where he stands. But people were left wondering, people were scratching their heads, and now, because some people cried, then Now look, he flip-flopped again. There was a particular thread that I wanted to read as well. Did I put it in here? I think I did. Okay. This is the thread that I wanted to read. And I find it interesting, and I would like to go to it just so that you guys can see. So this is guy's name's Nick Freeling. He said, "I'm not voting for Trump. I prefer not to hear or talk about him ever again." But before I completely check out, I wanted to explain just how self-serving were his comments on Florida's ballot amendments this week. They will do damage to GOP in Florida and nationally for decades. So, says first, understand Florida is not deep red. The GOP may have a supermajority in Tallahassee, but it's tenuous. Biden lost by just 3.4% in 2020, and Harris is on track to a similar result. Rick Scott is currently just 3 points ahead of his Democratic opponent. That said, consider what happens to a state when recreational marijuana is legalized. Remember Colorado? Now, through a legalized abortion until viability, and consider that no state for 1,000 miles in any direction has such a permissive abortion laws. These two amendments, which have a decent chance of passing, would turn Florida overnight into one of the country's most liberal states on these two issues. Suddenly, a Florida vacation means something very different than Mickey Mouse and sandy beaches. So, first of all, here's the thing. Because I live in Florida, Florida is still a solidly red state. Might I remind you also that Missouri legalized recreational marijuana as well. Just ask Nick. And so to me, the legalization of recreational marijuana is no different than the ending of prohibition. Like, there's a lot of people who are, staunch right-wingers who still drink alcohol. So with that being said, it's more just a personal freedom issue, right? On the issue of abortion, it's just up until viability, so the 24 weeks. So I don't see that as anything extreme as well, because Florida had this law before DeSantis put on a 6-week ban. So really just reverting back by a couple of years to what Florida was before. So ultimately, Florida would not be this liberal bastion that Nick Freeling is talking about. So continuing on. So back to Trump. What's so heinous about what he said this week? The bottom line is that he threw Florida Republicans under the bus. Here's how. Because they understand Florida politics, DeSantis and the Republican Party of Florida have adamantly opposed both of these amendments. Like I said, the majority in Tallahassee is a lot more tenuous than it seems on paper. Turning Florida into a weed and abortion destination isn't on their wish list. Like I said, the only difference that these ballot initiatives would present is that, number one, Florida goes back about 4 years or so to where we were before on abortion, and then marijuana would just be legalized. And would the numbers of people who smoke weed in Florida go up? Not that much, because there's a bunch of people who already do it here. Most people who already smoke weed here in Florida, they're doing it whether it's legalized or not. You're just going to make it so that they're not arrested or fined for it. That's it. It's not really that big of a deal. And the thing is like these people are acting like it's some major, massive deal. And they're losing their minds over it. Like, guys, it's not that serious, bruh. Jesus Christ, I'm telling you, these people. Anyway, other Republican strategists have noted how important it is that these amendments be defeated. If they pass, the socio-political environment in Florida massively changes overnight. Bullshit. It says it's not just Republican strategists who know this. Beginning the week after Dobbs passed, Democrat operatives began pushing this amendment in Florida. They canvassed tens of thousands of homes across Democrat-friendly counties in order to get the amendment on the ballot. This was a big opportunity. And shout out to those of us here in RBN or Orlando chapter. We were actually also trying to help get it on the ballot too. Good job, guys. All right. So Nick Freeling continues, says, don't believe me? Note that Kamala Harris campaign is spending the next week in Florida to talk about these amendments. No, they don't expect Kamala to win in Florida, but they know Trump is just one term left no matter what. They're playing the long game. If these amendments pass, Florida becomes liberal friendly. It empowers Democrat voters and draws more Democrats into the state. Now, here's the thing I want to bring up in regards to this. Y'all messed up. Now, just speaking from strategist brain, Jaybe here. Y'all messed up when y'all made Florida so attractive that people from places like Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and many other northern blue states, you made it so attractive to them that they actually came down and they brought their liberal values along with them in order to turn Florida more blue. Y'all messed up because y'all made Florida too attractive. Y'all were like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it so that Florida does not have a state income tax. Well, guess what? People were like, Florida ain't got no state income tax. All right, let's go. Now, as somebody that's a commie, yes, I am a communist living in Florida. I say, look, having a, returning it back to 24 weeks, that's actually a good thing because, look, we need more body autonomy among women and people who have uteruses. So I'm cool with that, right? Because, hey, shit, we need it. Also, for people being able to not go to prison in the carceral system or face fines in order to be able to smoke a plant, okay, cool, fine. My thing is, it's like, why haven't we done it years ago? Because, of course, racism and people wanting to push their beliefs on others. But the whole thing is, guess what? Y'all made Florida attractive. You know, beaches, sunny skies. We got Mickey Mouse here and his buddies and all the other rodents. So, yeah, y'all made Florida attractive. Now, Florida's getting bigger. We're in a population boom, especially here in Central Florida. By the way, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, one of the most expensive cities in Florida now is Orlando, my city. And rent prices are skyrocketing now. We are becoming more congested here because people from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Michigan, Illinois, they're all coming here because it's more attractive. Also because technically it's cheaper. And so now, guess what? They have, marijuana legalized there. So they're like, well, shoot, it should be legalized here too. But that doesn't mean just because there's more liberals here, that doesn't mean it's actually a good thing. Because a lot of these liberals here, they're just as, clinging to white supremacy, just like the conservatives do. But anyways, it says, pair that with the prospect that in Florida lays claim to 30 electoral points, 2 times more than Michigan and 3 times more than that of Wisconsin. What does Florida look like in 2028? 2032, are those 30 electoral points as likely to go to Trump's successor as to him, a Floridian? Clearly not. Florida's own beloved governor is opposed to these amendments. The GOP base here is socially conservative. So when Trump came out today in support of Amendment 3, and when voiced his disapproval with DeSantis' 6-week abortion ban a few days ago, he threw Florida Republicans under the bus. No, he won't lose Florida, but he made it vastly more difficult for Republicans to win when he's gone. Here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize when you go issue for issue, when it comes to actual left policies, the issue is that people will side with left policies. In 2020, what did we pass? We passed a $15 an hour minimum wage in Florida. And how was that done? Through ballot initiatives. See, if you put it before the people will always go in the interest of the workers. And this is why I see, especially now that Trump went behind and basically said, yeah, we should do Amendment 3. We should pass Amendment 3. Oh, it is as good as done, baby. It is done. Because now you have the Democrat and the Republican in favor of it. Oh, baby, it's done. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. By January 1st of 2025, people will be able to light up in Florida. And they'll be able to do it in front of the sheriff. They'll be able to do it in front of the police chief. They'll be able to do it in front of the people, the state troopers, and they can't do no damn thing about it. They can't do anything about it because the thing is, it's like it is perfectly legal. And by the way, the cops will be able to light up too because it's legal, and they won't get in trouble for it either on their downtime. It's going to happen. Said yes, I know. He rescinded his tacit support for the Amendment 4 a day later, but he still insists 6 weeks is too short about Florida's existing Republican-backed abortion ban. Why did he defy Florida Republicans in this way? Because he thinks it will help him win in swing states. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are pro-choice and pro-marijuana states. He wanted to signal that he's on their side and pick a few more votes. Of course, you could argue that this is what it takes to win elections. Winning the White House now is as important as protecting Florida's GOP majority and helping Florida future Republican presidential nominees. But the fact is, it was Trump who brought this up. He did so months ago before anyone asked. He waited. I think he meant to say he didn't. He waited until he knew that swing voters wanted to see before he throw the Florida GOP under the bus like this. It was always a tool in his back pocket. Florida loves Trump. That's just true. It matters that he endorsed Amendment 3, marijuana, and signaled his tacit support for more lenient abortion policy, Amendment 4. Florida Republican voters will listen to him, and he made the Amendment 4. Made the amendments more likely to pass. Says, but little did they know, because they love him just a little too much, that he risked massively compromising Republicans' future electoral prospects for decades to come. And he really didn't have to do it. He could have maybe spent more than 1 to 2 days a week on the campaign trail this summer and left Florida alone. Would RNC, not chaired by his daughter-in-law, have advised him against this? Most certainly. Did he run this by DeSantis? Almost certainly not. He just serves himself and himself only. Torpedoes Florida Republicans for the sake of just 4 more years. Because I alone can fix it, and people actually believe it. Oh boy. His honeymoon is fading. Says TLDR, Trump endorsed a 1.5 of the 2 amendments that Democrats specifically designed to shrink Republican strength in Florida, amendments that even Harris' campaign is coming to Florida next week to promote. So, with that being said, they ain't happy. Now, what do you guys think? Do you guys think Amendment 4, the 6-week abortion ban, will be overturned for a 24-week abortion ban, meaning that it'll go up to 24 weeks? Do you guys think that that's going to happen? Do you guys think it's going to pass? Now, here in Florida, you need a 60% supermajority in order for it to pass. In fact, let me see. Let me share with you guys Amendment 4, just so you guys know what is what, because everybody's like, oh, it's going to be until birth. That's BS. And then I can head on out. And then the Amendment 3 is pretty much, straightforward. You guys know that. But for Amendment 4, a yes vote supports adding the following language to the Florida Constitution Declaration of Rights. It says, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. Amendment 4 will maintain the current constitutional provision that permits law requiring parents to be notified before a minor can receive an abortion. A no vote opposes amending the Florida Constitution Declaration of Rights to provide that the state cannot prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. So it says the initiative will provide a constitutional right to abortion before viability or when necessary to protect a patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. The following language will be added to the state's constitution, except as provided in Article 10, Section 22, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. The initiative would not change the state legislator's authority to enact law requiring the parents of a minor to be notified if their child is seeking an abortion, with exceptions that can be attained through a judicial waiver. So, meaning you cannot be restricted before viability, which is 24 weeks. So, when they say it's up to birth, they are lying to you. So, with that being said, Trump flip-flopped on that. And then Amendment 3, Trump flip-flopped on, Trump flipped on that. He hasn't flopped on it yet. Of course, MAGA is trying to get him to flop back. But I honestly don't see it happening because it's not as touchy of a subject. But do you guys think that it's actually going to pass? I think Amendment 3 for sure is going to pass. Amendment 4, I'm like 55, 60% sure it will pass. I'm about 50 because there are even Republicans that are in favor of going yes on Amendment 4, because there's some Republicans that go, well, no, because it's, the person's, personal right. And as long as it's before fetal viability, it's their personal right. Even some Republicans are even in favor of Amendment 4. It's not all Republicans. They don't all feel the exact same way. Great Patine says, it doesn't matter who wins the election. What matters is that we successfully make them bend to us. Agreed. Yes, a non-user says, cops make money busting weed smokers on spring break. Likely main reason not legalized. Yeah, because they ultimately just want that money and civil asset forfeiture and things like that in order to maintain, their budgets. And if it's legal, then they can't do it. They now actually have to crack down on more serious drugs. Mouse says anointing traditionally done using cannabis oil smeared all over the body to induce the psychedelic. Oh, I did not know that. Interesting. Threads. I'll just read that part. Threads says, first they swindled you out of your inalienable rights to the pursuit of happiness. Then they swindled you out of liberty and another inalienable right. No privacy against government intrusion is no liberty. Wardy says this Nick Freeling guy is so upset he's about to unalive himself, as the TikTokers say. Oh gosh. Jacqueline says, I think the show is almost finished. So okay. Yeah, I'm about to head out in a second. Let me see. Hobbs says, laughing my effing ass off. Is a dude's now just catching on that Trump serves Trump and no one else. Yeah, like we've been saying this for years. Rondo says, I hope Florida allows home grow. I think it will. But I think it depends on how much too. Cobra Commander says cartels would suddenly become legal. Hippie farmers and white kids from all over America would work the newly reformed cocaine fields again. The caveat is no more funding for the CIA. Here's my thing. Another thing, and I say this, a lot of people who are getting upset about Trump, getting behind Amendment 3 and saying yes on Amendment 3. The issue is like, I thought you guys were against the cartels. This ultimately would take the power away from the cartels. By the way, for those of y'all in Florida, if you're a plug, I would suggest you get a business license now. Get yourself a business license. Save up some of that money from selling your product. Get a business license. Because once this stuff goes legal, you may want to get a storefront. You might want to do that because the people who sell the medical grade, if once this stuff comes legal, guess what? They're opening up their storefront to everybody. You don't need a card anymore. And so then you might need to do that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, because once gas gets legal, you guys are going to have competition, even harder competition now. I'm just saying. And those of you who do like the smoked barbecue ribs and stuff like that on the street corners, y'all may want to invest in a Costco card now because you guys are going to get a lot more business. Especially, selling them ribs on the corner, smoked ribs. Yeah. And those of you who be frying fish too, yeah, you guys may want to start investing in like selling a little bit more in the corner because people are going to be hungry out there. Yeah. But yes. Sulu said, I let my son's friend know. Oh gosh, this is going to be hilarious. Look, if I'm like 75 to 80% sure that this will pass because in the years prior, we've gotten almost to 60% of it passing for recreational. We've gotten this close. So now it's pretty much sure to be passed. And once it does, it's going to be interesting to see. I know Rome and Nick is going to want to come down here now. They're going to come down here for Tour for the Poor. It's going to be fun. Anywho, so yeah, I'm late. I need to get going. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. This Tuesday, I will be in Tampa, Florida for the African People's Socialist Party trial. They are being indicted by the Department of Justice. So I'll be there to cover that trial. And I'll try to see if I can get into the courtroom to at least give my thoughts afterwards about, all the things that have happened. So I'll be there. So I'll be covering that on my channel. So if you guys would like to tune into that, you guys can always go to my channel. That's linked in the description below. And yeah, so I'll also be doing some readings a little bit later in the day for my channel. So thank you very much for anybody who tunes in to that. Also, by the way, in addition to and furthermore, if you guys would like to, you guys can also become patrons on Patreon. It is deeply appreciated because, well, look, that's, how we roll. That's how we are able to keep ourselves going. You guys literally keep the lights on. So thank you very much for that. And I think Nick has a guest coming on tomorrow. I forgot to check, but stay tuned. I know he has a guest coming on this Tuesday as well. So stay tuned for that. And so, yeah, and then we'll be back on with Sabby and Jaybe this Thursday. So it's going to be a good old time, So, yes. And if you guys are in Florida, then please make sure to tune in, listen out about the ballot initiatives. Of course, I'm covering the ballot initiatives. I'll be covering ballot initiative number 5 this week. So if you guys would like to, you guys can tune into that, Amendment 5. So we'll be doing that as well. All right. Now, with that being said, like I always say, you guys know exactly what it is. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found them. Do all the things if you got them, smoke them if you got them, and especially, if Amendment 3 passes, we're definitely going to be doing that. Some of my neighbors will definitely be doing that. Drink them if you got them, because that's also legal too. And if you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary. Or read, because reading is fundamental. I love you guys for watching and staying with me here on RBN. I will head on out, but forehead kisses to every single one of you. And while I'm at it, I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to all the patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, we would not be able to do this. Take care and have yourself a wonderful day. Love you, folks. And keep that revolutionary optimism.